Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Now today I have a buying guide for the Atari Lynx handheld. Now this is a system that not a lot of people know about, but it's actually pretty fun to collect for. So in this video I'm going to talk about the hardware. There are two different models, as well as give you some game recommendations that you should pick up day one. And I'm also going to show you a screen modification that I had done to my system that fixes its biggest problem. Let's take a look. And here is the Model 1 of the Atari Lynx. This is a 16-bit handheld and it was released in 1989 in North America. And it was designed to compete with the Nintendo Game Boy. Its big selling point is that it's the world's first handheld with a colored LCD. However, that color screen with a backlit display came at the expense of battery life, and also it pushed its retail price up towards $180. Here I'm showing the two side by side, and yes, it's significantly larger than the original Game Boy, but honestly, today, I don't really mind. I mean, I'm not looking to put either of these in my pocket, and I kind of like the look of the original Lynx. It has this futuristic look, and it's very comfortable to hold. One of its more distinctive features is this ComLinks plug here, where you can link up to 15 other Lynx handhelds, which is pretty cool, although I don't know if a lot of modern gamers would do it, but it's there if you want to. Another thing you need to be aware of if you buy one of these is the brightness dial that's on the bottom, because the LCD is kind of hard to dial in, and we're going to talk more about the screen in a bit, but just be aware that this is here. The way you insert the game in the Model 1 here is on the side. There's a door that you open, then you slide the game in, and then it closes, and it becomes part of the handle. Not the most elegant of solutions, but it works and it protects it. And of course we gotta talk about batteries, because being a backlit color LCD, well, it burns through the batteries. This uses 6 AA batteries, and you get about 4 to 5 hours of use. So if you collect one of these today, you're definitely gonna wanna also get the power adapter. So let's talk about the screen, because I think that's gonna be the issue that most new gamers are going to have to deal with when they come to this, because you know, this was colored LCD backlit in 1989, and this was the best you could do. But looking at it today, it's definitely washed out. It's a little bit blurry. The scan lines are there. So what I recommend you do is do what I did and have that replaced with a modern LCD kit. And as you can see here, it fixes everything. I mean, it's so much clearer, so much brighter, no blur whatsoever. There's a guy on AtariAge.com that does these mods. As a matter of fact, he did my Game Gear mod that I showed off a couple years ago. So totally worth it. I'll put links in the video description below. And then a couple years later in 1991, Atari released the second model shown here. And this one is smaller and lighter and has a couple other changes that make it the preferred version. For one, it's much easier to insert and remove the games. You just slide them into the slot here in the back. They now moved all the inputs and control options to the top of the device, which makes sense. And also this now supports stereo out to your headphones, where the original was just mono. A feature of the Lynx that's pretty unique to the system is the ability to play games either right-handed or left-handed by simply just pushing 2 buttons. So if you push flip and option 2 at the same time, you'll see the screen immediately just flips the other way. You turn the device, and those A/B buttons at the top or bottom will work. So it's designed to work with gamers that are right or left-handed, and both models do the exact same thing. It's pretty cool. Although, again, I don't know if most modern gamers care, but it's a neat feature of the Lynx. All right, it's all about the games, so let's talk about them. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that this is how they come packaged. They are in these cardboard boxes. They're fairly neat. They usually have really awesome cover art as well as information on the back. The problem, of course, being cardboard is that often they are damaged when you find them. The games themselves come as these credit card-like flat cartridges that you could stack fairly easily. At least the first generation were. There's actually a second generation where they added these little tabs on the back so that you could remove it from the Lynx easier. And then they revised it even further with these little lips here. And so this is what you typically find most Lynx games as, is they'll have this little curve here, which makes it very easy to get them in and out of the system. However, they're not very stackable. So just be aware that there's these 3 different versions. And speaking of games, well, here are some games that I think that pretty much any gamer should check out if they're thinking of getting into playing on the Lynx. And the first one is going to be Scrapyard Dog. Here's a 2D platformer where you play as a little kid named Louie, who's trying to make his way through various stages to save his kidnapped dog from Mr. Big. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Big is also a character from Sex and the City. Don't judge me because I know that, I'm just pointing something out. This game's known for its tight controls as well as fun and imaginative levels, and it has a serious challenge. One of the things about this game is that it has one-hit deaths, which that can feel kind of cheap, but if you play through a level enough times, you know that you'll be able to anticipate enemies, and then you can pull it off and you start getting better at it. This game was also available on the Atari 7800, but a lot of people prefer to play it here because the Lynx port is just excellent. Next up is Blue Lightning, which is an arcade flying game on the Lynx. This has a look and feel that's very similar to Afterburner. This game's known for having a variety of mission and level types, including canyon runs, stealth missions, as well as naval battles with ships over water. There are 9 missions to complete, tight controls, and great graphics for a handheld. If you like these kind of games, you should definitely check this out. Next up is Xybots, and this is based on an arcade game. In this game, you make your way through mazes, you blow up some robots, find keys, unlock doors. You'll also buy some upgrades, and then you turn around and just blow up more robots. I remember this game being very notable in the arcades because it was one of the first third-person 3D rendered games that I played. And the Lynx handles this pretty well, although in the arcade game, when you would turn corners, it would render that 3D in real time, and you know, the Lynx isn't powerful enough to do it, but honestly, you don't miss it. I mean, basically, you just hit a button, you hit the B button, and you turn immediately. But other than that, this plays and feels very similar to the actual arcade game. This is also a good time to mention that those option buttons on the Lynx are often used in games. So for instance, in this, if you press options, it brings up a real-time map. Very handy. Here's a game that shows up on pretty much every best of list when you're talking about the Lynx, and that is Chip's Challenge. Chip's Challenge is an original puzzle game that was designed from the ground up for the Lynx, and then was later ported over to Windows. Now, I know what you're saying. This is not necessarily the best looking Lynx game that you've ever seen, but the gameplay and puzzles are very clever. Also, there's quite a bit of variety in this game, as well as challenge. This is not an easy game, but it is fair and very satisfying when you figure out that last piece you needed to unlock the next puzzle. If you like puzzle games and you have a Lynx, you definitely need this game in your collection. Next up is Rygar. A lot of you will be familiar with this because it is also based on an arcade game. Now, this is basically a standard run and gun type game, although you don't have a gun, you actually have this disc on a chain. Is it just me, or does this game also remind you of Rastin? I used to love Rastin back in the day. Actually, a lot of these games that were these muscle-bound, Conan the Barbarian-like games, but Rygar definitely stands its own. I like it because it's not as tough as Rastin. For some reason, it's a little bit on the easier side, although I have to say, this game is deceptively easy in the beginning, but like many arcade games at the time, it gets tough pretty quickly, especially when you have to run, jump, and attack at the same time. But Again, the Lynx port is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Next up is a game called BattleWheels. This is a first-person shooter, but from inside your car. Basically think of this as Twisted Metal, but it's exclusive to the Lynx. This game takes place in the distant post-apocalyptic future of 2019. I love it when we catch up to the year of these games. It's so funny. In this game, you have 6 combatants shooting it out in a battle arena. You get to customize your car with powerful engines, as well as upgrading the armor, putting on additional ammo, and you can select from a bunch of different weapons, including machine guns, missiles, flamethrowers, you can equip mines, and much more. Think of this as your portable Mad Max simulator, and it's definitely one of the best on the Lynx. California Games was released as a pack-in for the system, at least initially. This is a really cool game because it has 4 different mini games, including BMX, surfing, half pipe, and footbag, which is also known as hacky sack. What's great about this game, especially as a pack-in, because it shows the power of the Lynx really well, and each one of these games stands on their own. BMX has you traveling through a rough track, doing tricks and trying to avoid obstacles. Not great at it, but it's still pretty fun. But surfing is probably my favorite. This is really fun. You're trying to stay ahead of a powerful wave, doing tricks, and trying to keep up your speed. It's challenging, but not too difficult. However, the half pipe, oh my gosh, I am so bad at this, and I apologize for the footage. I tried to get this down, but I'm just the worst at it. I can never get the timing right, even though I so badly want to be good at it. And then there's footbag, or like I mentioned, hacky sack. That's what I called it in high school. This is really fun because you try to keep your combo going, but you're also trying to hit that low-flying bird. I don't know why that's so compelling, but every time I play this, I just want to knock him out of the sky. I mean, what's wrong with me? Stun Runner is another arcade conversion that plays surprisingly well on this small screen. This game is pretty unique because it's in the future, and the way it works is it auto accelerates, so you're constantly going forward and you're trying to shoot your way through these lightning fast tracks without trying to make too many mistakes that will cost you time. There are these power-ups that you try to drive over that will give you boost, but then you have these obstacles that will immediately slow you down. This is all about trying to survive till the end of the level. It has really fast graphics that I think are pretty impressive today, especially for a handheld. Next up is another flight game. The Lynx happens to have several of these that are actually really well made. This one's called Warbirds. This is a fun World War I arcade sim. When I first fired this up, it immediately reminded me of the PC classic Red Baron, and that's definitely a good thing because yes, modern flight sims are fun, but these World War I arcade flight sims have their own vibe because the airplanes move so slow. And it changes everything. Also, there's no missiles, and so everything is very close combat. It's really cool. I also think for a flight sim running on a handheld in 1989, these graphics are pretty dang good. I mean, you know exactly what's going on here. Again, it reminds me of Red Baron, but just maybe lower resolution. However, there's no real story mode to speak of here, but that's okay because this is all about pick up and play portable aerial combat, and that's awesome. Yay, Miss Pac-Man! Probably my favorite version of all the Pac-Mans, especially the arcade version. So what can you say about this classic other than it is a top-notch conversion on the Lynx? And while the levels are a bit pixelated, especially on that low resolution screen, I do appreciate how the developer chose not to have the screen scroll like so many other conversions at the time. Miss Pac-Man looks and plays exactly like you would expect on the Lynx, so if you like the original like I do, this won't disappoint. Zarlor Mercenary. I love that name. It sounds like a space pirate in a bad 80s movie, doesn't it? But this is one of the more sort of rare or uncommon Lynx games. This is a vertical shooter that is well done and exclusive to this handheld. In the game, you can choose from 4 different characters, and each have their own weapons. There's lots of different enemy types within a level, as well as a boss at the end. You guys know me, I love my shooters, I play a ton of them, but this game offers some serious challenge even for veterans of the genre like me. But thankfully the controls are tight, as well as the graphics are easy to make out and they don't slow down very much, so the game is fair and pretty rewarding to beat. So if you can find a copy, I do recommend you pick up Zarlor Mercenary. Todd's Adventure in Sly Moral. Now here is a 2D adventure game that has somewhat of a Metroid vibe, kinda, but it also has a look and feel all of its own. In this game, you explore dark underground tunnels as well as caverns that just ooze with all sorts of mystery and life. I think that's the reason why I kind of compare this to Metroid, because again, you're underground and it's really kind of creepy at times. You have lots of tools and gems to collect, as well as slimy creatures to avoid, or you can take them out with your water pistol. I would say its downside, and you can kind of tell based on the footage here, is that it's somewhat slow paced, so it's not going to be for everybody, but I think it shows off the power of the Lynx fairly well, and it's also a deep and fairly involving adventure game. I also want to mention that I just barely scratched the surface of what you can find and play on the Atari Lynx. Now, according to the Wikipedia article, there is 74 licensed games released for the system, and the good news is that many of these games are really fun and often cheap. I mean, collecting for the Atari Lynx is not an expensive hobby, and you can get a complete collection for relatively little money. So as you can see, the Atari Lynx is a pretty cool handheld, especially if you get that screen modification done. If you want more information about that, I'll put a link down in the video description below. Also, let me know, do you collect for the Atari Lynx, and what other games should I add? Because I've only got about, say, 20 of them, and there's quite a bit more, so I'd love to know what you guys think. As always, I want to thank you for watching my channel, thank you for subscribing, and take care. At the end here, I want to remind you that I did a buying guide for the Sega Game Gear, which came out a little bit after the Lynx, and in my mind, they're very similar handhelds. And in that buying guide, I show you the screen mod and upgrade that the same guy did, and just like the Lynx, it completely changes the Game Gear. It just suddenly opens it up, and you know, honestly, I think most people should probably collect both because there's not a lot of overlap. I mean, they're very different libraries, but yet the technology is somewhat similar. They're both really fun handhelds to collect for, and not everyone talks about them. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching.